Ever find yourself waiting for someone who's always late? You know that feeling, tapping your foot, checking your watch, like, come on already.
Oh, yeah.
Well, today we're diving deep into this very question. Um, Someone posted on Reddit, people who are literally always late, why?
Mm.
And they got hundreds of responses.
Hmm.
So we're going through them to try to understand what's going on.
It's a great question, and I'm curious to see what people said.
Yeah, there's some pretty interesting stuff in here.
I bet.
Some funny stuff, too.
Haha.
Some insightful answers, some brutal, honestly.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like right away, a ton of people pointed to underestimating time.
Uh-huh.
It's like our brains just can't grasp how long things actually take.
Yeah, it's like that saying time flies when you're having fun, but it also flies when you're trying to get out the door.
Exactly. And it's like we focus on the destination, like getting to work, but forget about all the little steps in between.
Right, all those little things add up.
Like one commenter talked about someone who lived across the street from work, but was still always late.
Oh, wow. How is that even possible?
Apparently, they just never factored in like the time it takes to get out of bed, get dressed, all that.
That's wild. I guess it just shows how easily we can misjudge time.
And a lot of times this goes hand in hand with optimism bias.
Optimism bias?
Yeah, basically late people genuinely believe they can fit way more into their schedule than is humanly possible.
Ah, I see. So it's not just that they're bad at estimating time, they actually think they can bend the rules of time.
Yeah, like one person said, it's that whole I can totally make it to yoga,
Mm.
pick up the dry cleaning and bake a cake before dinner thing.
Uh-huh.
They're not trying to be inconsiderate. They just have this unrealistic faith in their ability to do it all.
That's interesting. It's almost like a superpower they think they have.
Right. But that optimism usually leads to a constant cycle of rushing and, well, being late.
I can see that. It's
Yeah.
like they're setting themselves up for failure.
Exactly. So
Nice.
it makes you wonder, is it better to be realistic and on time, but maybe a little pessimistic? Or optimistic and always running behind?
That's a tough one.
It really makes you think about how we view time and how much control we actually have over it.
Speaking of control, a lot of people in the thread mentioned ADHD and time blindness.
Yeah, that was a big one.
And it makes sense.
People with ADHD talked about feeling lost in time, like they never quite know what time it is or how much has passed.
Right. It's not just about being forgetful or disorganized. It's a real neurological difference in how they perceive
Yeah,
time.
exactly. Like one person said they could get so focused on putting on their socks that they'd lose track of time completely.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds funny, but imagine a simple task like that turning into a time warp.
I can see how frustrating that would be.
And for a lot of people with ADHD, that's their reality every day.
So it's not a choice for them to be late, it's a struggle.
Right.
That's important to remember. So for people with ADHD who struggle with time blindness, how do they manage?
Well, a lot of people in the thread talked about coming to terms with it, like having that aha moment where they realize, okay, time and I, we don't always see eye to eye.
Right.
And then they start looking for ways to work around it.
Look, what kinds of things?
Well, a lot of it comes down to setting realistic goals, like ditching that this will only take 5 minutes mindset
Oh, I know that one.
and forcing themselves to think, okay, realistically with my track record, this is probably going to take at least 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anticipating distractions and delays, that seems to be key.
Definitely.
And building in buffer time.
Buffer time.
Yeah, like if it usually takes you 30 minutes to get ready, schedule 45.
Just in case.
Exactly. Just in case you get sucked into the black hole of putting on socks.
Aha, the sock vortex.
Then there's the visual reminders.
Oh, yeah, those are helpful.
Sticky notes everywhere. Phone alarms going off every 5 seconds.
Like a time bomb?
Pretty much. Anything to create that external awareness of time,
Right, because their internal clock might be a little off.
Exactly. And then, of course, communication is huge.
Of course.
If you're going to be late for whatever reason, just let people know.
A quick heads up can go a long way.
Absolutely. It shows respect for the other person's time.
Right.
Which brings us to a bit of a controversial one.
What's that?
Lying about the start time.
Lying.
Yeah. Some people admitted to telling their chronically late friends that things start earlier than they actually do.
Interesting.
Like a little white lie to nudge them towards punctuality.
I see. But I can see how that could backfire.
Oh, yeah. It could definitely erode trust and cause resentment.
And it's kind of patronizing, isn't it?
Totally. Like you're treating them like a child who can't handle the truth.
Right, and it doesn't really solve the problem.
Nope. Open communication, that's where it's at.
And a willingness to address those root causes of lateness.
Okay, so let's talk about the social dynamics of lateness, because this is where things got really interesting in the thread.
How so?
Some people were like, look, being chronically late is just plain rude. It's disrespectful.
Yeah, I can see that point of view.
Right. It's like you're saying your time is more important than everyone else's.
Which can definitely strain relationships.
For sure. But then other people, especially those with ADHD, felt like they were being unfairly judged. Like
Right.
they're trying their best, but their brains just work differently.
It's not always a conscious choice to be late.
Exactly. It's like their internal clock is set to a different beat.
And society's metronome just doesn't quite sync up.
That's a great way to put it. And it highlights the need for empathy.
Absolutely.
If you know someone struggles with time blindness, try to approach their lateness with compassion.
Not judgment.
Right. Because sometimes it's not about selfishness. It's about a mismatch between how they experience time and a world that's obsessed with the clock.
I like that. A mismatch?
It makes you wonder, like, what if our rigid adherence to the clock is actually stifling some brilliant minds out there?
People who think outside the time box.
Exactly. And that brings up a really interesting question that someone posed in the thread.
What's that?
What if lateness isn't always a bad thing?
Oh.
Like, could there be a silver lining to those unexpected delays?
I've never thought about it that way.
Right. They were arguing that a little bit of lateness can actually allow for spontaneity and flexibility.
Interesting.
That's like sometimes you have to get lost to find yourself.
Uh-huh.
Maybe a little detour from our rigid schedules can lead to unexpected adventures.
Like happy accidents.
Exactly. Like I remember one time I was rushing to meet a friend for coffee,
Yeah.
but then I stumbled upon this street musician playing the most incredible flamenco guitar.
Oh, wow.
If I had been glued to my schedule,
Yeah.
I would have missed that completely.
That's a great example.
So it's about finding that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Between respecting time and being open to those serendipitous moments.
Right, because obviously there's a difference between embracing spontaneity and just being constantly late to everything.
Yeah, for sure. But we also can't ignore the elephant in the room,
Which is...
technology. So many people in the thread talked about how the constant notifications, emails, demands for instant responses. It's just overwhelming.
It's like we're all tethered to our devices 24/7.
Right. And it's fragmenting our attention,
Yeah,
making it even harder to stay on track.
I can definitely relate to that.
Like we're all juggling a million digital balls, and sometimes those time management balls just slip through the cracks.
That's a good analogy. And it might explain why we feel like we have less time than ever.
Right. It's like this collective sense of time scarcity,
Always rushing, always trying to catch up.
which ironically could be making us even more prone to lateness.
Because we're trying to cram more and more into our already packed schedules.
Exactly. So we've talked about time blindness and the dopamine rush of running late and the importance of empathy and all that.
Right.
But there's another layer to this whole thing, like how our culture and society view time.
That's a good point.
Our ideas about being on time aren't just personal quirks.
Uh-huh.
They're shaped by the world around us. Like, I've always wondered, is this Western obsession with being on time, is it just an arbitrary thing? I mean, some cultures have a much more fluid relationship with time.
Yeah, for sure.
And they seem to function just fine.
Right. It makes you question our whole system a little bit, doesn't it?
Totally. And a bunch of people in the thread pointed out that what's considered rude lateness in one culture could be totally normal in another.
Exactly.
So it really makes you think about how much of this is cultural and how much is personal.
It's a fascinating question.
And then someone posed this really mind-blowing question.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
What if lateness isn't always a bad thing?
Whoa. Okay.
Like, could there actually be a silver lining to those unexpected delays?
I like where this is going.
Right. They were saying that a little bit of lateness can actually be beneficial because it allows for more spontaneity and flexibility.
Interesting.
It's like that saying, sometimes you have to get lost to find yourself. Maybe those detours from our rigid schedules can lead to unexpected adventures and discoveries.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like that time I was telling you about rushing to meet a friend for coffee.
Right.
And I stumbled upon that amazing flamenco guitarist.
Oh, yeah. That was cool.
If I had been glued to my schedule, I would have totally missed out on that.
Get those little moments, right?
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between respecting time and being open to those serendipitous moments.
I love that serendipitous moments.
But of course, there's a difference between embracing spontaneity and just being chronically late to everything,
Right. We can't forget about responsibilities and all that.
for sure. Okay, so we've got to talk about technology too.
Ah, yes, the tech elephant in the room.
So many people in the thread said that the constant notifications and emails and the pressure to respond instantly, it's just too much.
It's overwhelming.
It's like it's fragmenting our attention,
Yeah,
making it harder to stay on top of things.
I totally agree. It's like we're constantly bombarded with information.
Right. And it makes it hard to focus on anything for very long,
I feel
which
that
might actually be contributing to us being more late.
because we're trying to do too many things at once.
Exactly. It's like this vicious cycle.
So where does that leave us? What have we learned from all this?
Well, it seems like chronic lateness is a pretty complex issue.
Yeah, definitely not a simple answer.
It's not just one thing you know. It's a mix of neurological differences and psychological tendencies and cultural norms.
And the demands of digital age.
Right. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is the need for empathy and communication
For sure.
and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions about time and how we value it.
Because maybe it's not about being perfectly punctual all the time.
Exactly. Maybe it's about finding a rhythm that works for us and for our relationships and for the messy, unpredictable beauty of life.
I like that a lot. The messy, unpredictable beauty of life.
So, listeners, we encourage you to keep thinking about all this.
Yeah, keep the conversation going.
Talk to your friends and family about their experiences with time and lateness. Share your own strategies for managing your schedule. And remember to approach those who march to a different drummer with a little grace and understanding.
Because we're all just trying to figure this whole time thing out together.
One tick of the clock at a time.